Network solutions provider MainOne says its Nigeria-Cameroun Submarine Cable System is now live and would connect Lagos and Kribi in Cameroon. The system aims to address the increasing demand for reliable broadband connectivity in the region. Earlier, CNBC Africa on Sunday spoke to Kazeem Oladepo, Regional Executive for West Africa, and discussed ways to improve broadband penetration in the region.
ICT development in the region has been growing. It's better than it used to be 5 years ago. So there's been remarkable growth when you look at indicators. When you talk about teledensity and growth in internet connectivity. Telephony has grown remarkably. I think the region is trending in some places at over 100% connectivity. But data is still not growing as we would like it to be. It's average around 35–36% for the region. And when you look at Africa as a whole, that's not bad on a general level. But when you compare to the rest of the world and how the continent itself is performing, there's a lot of work yet needed to be done to grow in that space. But general outlook is there's growth. Slower than imagined, not as well as telephony has done. But of course, telephony is also supporting it because most of the connections today on data are actually on mobile telephony platform. That accounts for over 90% of internet access in the region.
Well, it's interesting you should mention the fact that you just said something really key there. You said, well, it's not so bad for the region. But again, when you compare it to what's obtainable in the Western world, there is a lot to do in that space. And especially when you consider the fact that we're sort of in competition with, with these regions in terms of moving our economy forward. And if most businesses are going to be operating in this space, then really a lot more has to be done. But Nigeria's Minister of Communication Technology has set an ambitious 80% broadband penetration target for Nigeria by 2018. What's your opinion? What will be the key drivers to achieve this target? Is it achievable, judging by what is in existence at the moment?
Going back to your question and then the first question as well, when you start to compare with other parts of the world, I think Africa's contribution to internet connectivity is rated around 8% of the global eyeballs on the internet today, which when you compare with the population of the world and the percentage that Africa has of that population is pretty low. There are lots of factors that drive that, and both in terms of factors that drive people accessing the ICT infrastructure, facilities or services itself, and also the provision of those services generally. So the demand side, the supply side of it, the ability for people to access it, and also the ability for those services themselves to be provided. And there's a big rift out there in terms of the services being available and people being able to connect to those services. And there are a lot of drivers that actually drive the connection between those two factors, and they're not there yet. But when you take Nigeria as a case, for instance, internet connectivity in Nigeria is around 51% today. That's in terms of penetration to population. And then the government wants to grow that to 80%, which is, if you look at what happened with telephony itself, which is now trending at over 100%, I think 108% penetration level, is achievable. But again, telephony rode on the back of mobile networks, a lot of private sector initiative, conducive regulatory environment as well, so one needs to give a lot of credit to the government for leading that change. But however, you've not seen, or we have not seen, the same level of development on the data side, which is the broadband connectivity side of the ICT indicators. So what do we need to do to get to that 80%? I think we need to do a lot of policies, not just policies, implementing those policies. Nigeria has an ICT policy, national ICT policy that has been developed for, I think, about 2 years now. A lot of the key points in that policy have not been implemented. So those have to be implemented. And most of it centers around infrastructure. If you have the right infrastructure, or you have the right structures that enables people to develop and build those infrastructure, and you sort of put a lot of emphasis on access as well, and you have the right policies that are driving access in terms of device access, which thankfully are becoming cheaper and affordable now for people to be able to own, then we will drive more of connectivity to the internet and, more importantly, to the broadband, where we're actually trending at 10% today in Nigeria. It's achievable, no doubt, but it takes a lot of serious work and a lot of intervention on the side of government as well to make this happen.
Now, you did mention that there are key policies that need to be implemented if they really need to achieve these targets. Can you talk us through some of these policies which you think are key to achieving these targets, besides infrastructure? Okay,
so for infrastructure, really, today we have 5 cables terminating in Nigeria. So from a broadband perspective, there's a lot of capacity into the country for international connectivity. However, the local links that needs to connect these services to the consumer are not fully developed. So last year, for instance, MainOne had a bid for the terrestrial infrastructure project that the NCC and the federal government has been trying to implement, which is the InfraCo project, which allows across 6 regions for a single operator to build terrestrial infrastructure and share it with other operators at prices that are regulated by the NCC on behalf of a government. This is supposed to enable people to have more, operators to have access for distribution, and for the distribution to enable further growth in the penetration rate in country, both for the mobility side and for the fixed side of the broadband business. Now, that's only one side of it. Even if we get all this infrastructure in and we have the policies that supports them and they're enforced, there are also factors such as content, for instance, that leads to people being able to utilize these services and growing the connectivity and ICT foothold in the region. In Nigeria in particular, if we have the right content, so you need to develop capacity, right from the educational sector, you need to develop the right capacity for people to grow content. You need to support a lot of the innovation businesses that are springing up as a result of what MainOne and other operators have done. You have the CC Hub, you have the Andelas, who are actually growing capacity at that level and supporting people who are coming up with content that then makes the internet more attractive to people to use. Then government itself also needs to start building capacity within.
Now, talking about contributions that have actually been made by certain companies, Nigeria was ranked 136 out of 167 on ICT development by ITU in 2015, and this, of course, triggered mixed reactions across the country. Now, would you say that Nigeria's digital potential was undermined by this ranking?
Well, I think it's a function of the way you look at it. For me, I see it as opportunity. I don't think, also the use of the word undermined. So it's a growing market. So it does mean that there's a lot of room for growth and there are opportunities in this market to make that growth. MainOne and a lot of other ICT companies, the operators, the telephone operators, the mobile operators, and the cable companies are actually doing a lot to grow bandwidth here, supported by government, of course. But it does mean that there's still room to grow and do a lot more, imposing those policies that we've started to talk about, access, pricing, intervention with funding subsidies that the government needs to do to attain the level of ICT growth that the company aspires to get to. So I don't see it as a negative. I see it as a positive in terms of the opportunities for investment in that segment of the economy and the growth opportunities that are there for those people who do investment.
Kazeem, that brings me to a recent achievement by your company. Your company recently announced the completion of the Nigeria-Cameroun Submarine Cable System. And can you speak to us and just talk us through the importance of this project in increasing broadband penetration in the region?
So we're talking about connectivity, submarine connectivity infrastructure between Nigeria and Cameroon, which essentially was facilitated working with Huawei of a relationship with Camtel out of Cameroon, which is the incumbent operating entity in Cameroon. The objective is to grow connectivity, to grow access to ICT infrastructure, to grow regional integration, to facilitate trade. And Cameroon is not the only country where MainOne currently operates. We operate out of 8 countries in Africa today, supported by partners who have terrestrial links that connect most of those countries in the region. We're actually planning to also do a landing in Ivory Coast, which is scheduled for some time this year, and as well working on landing in Senegal. The objective really is to grow more internet presence in this country, to deepen the connectivity and access to connectivity levels in these countries, to foster regional trade. We're seeing a lot more companies operate in multiple states out of the region to kind of provide efficiency, productivity improvements, using the internet as a platform that drives it. And also really to drive a lot of social integration amongst these countries and the people in these countries. So that's the objective for MainOne. And you know, the key objectives for the MainOne investors from day one has always been to bridge the gap, digital divide between Africa and the rest of the world. And that's what we're facilitating in the region.
All right, well, Kazeem, just in a nutshell, what has been the challenge, you know, the challenges you faced so far in implementing this project?
Well, the key challenges are access challenges, like I said initially. It's not anymore a problem with bringing the capacity to the region. It's a lot more these days with getting access to the last mile and to the consumers who need to have access to the services. Across the region, a bit of dissimilarities when you compare countries. But Ghana, for instance, has a better access model where you can actually share infrastructure with third parties without having to duplicate those infrastructure and incur costs that are then passed on to consumers. But it's not the same across the region. Prices of connectivity locally in Nigeria is still more expensive than what it costs you to bring the connectivity all the way between London and Lagos. You're definitely going to pay more to get that same capacity from Lagos to Abuja, for instance. So that's a key area where there are challenges. And I think that there are policies. It's just a function of implementing those policies and also having the buy-in of the operating entities in the region, in those countries in the region, who needs to support those policies when they're implemented, and transparently as well, so that the consumers can benefit and we can see the desired level of growth that we're aspiring for.
That was Kazeem Oladepo, Regional Executive for West Africa at MainOne.